When we picture the ancient Roman Empire today, our minds instantly conjure visions of gleaming white marble, towering aqueducts, and legions marching in perfect, disciplined formations. We imagine a civilization of unparalleled majesty and philosophical high-mindedness. But the true foundation of this mighty empire was not just built on marble and military might. It was built on something you and I flush away without a second thought. To understand the real Rome, we have to look down into the gutters. In the ancient world, human urine was not merely a biological hazard to be disposed of. It was a highly prized, essential industrial chemical. Left to sit, urine naturally decomposes into ammonia, and ammonia was the absolute lifeblood of Rome's massive textile and leather industries. Without this potent liquid, the empire's famed gas could not be bleached white, and its armor-grade leather could not be tanned. The streets of Rome were lined with large clay pots specifically placed for passing citizens to relieve themselves, a daily contribution to the empire's booming commercial engine. So, how did this biological necessity transform into one of the most infamous acts in human history? The answer lies in a catastrophic financial crisis. By the middle of the 1st century, the magnificent facade of Rome was crumbling under the weight of staggering imperial debt. Emperor Nero, a man whose appetite for luxury knew absolutely no bounds, had effectively drained the royal treasury dry. He built sprawling, gold-plated palaces, hosted orgies of unimaginable extravagance, and practically bankrupted the state to fund his personal theater performances. Nero treated the wealth of the greatest empire on earth as his own purse, piggy bank. And when his chaotic reign finally ended in his forced suicide, he left behind a state teetering on the edge of total economic annihilation. The empire was quite literally broke. The imperial coffers, once overflowing with the spoils of conquered nations, were now echoing with emptiness. Rome desperately needed a financial savior, or it would collapse under its own colossal weight. What followed was not a savior, but a nightmare. The year 680 became known as the Year of the Four Emperors. Imagine the chaos. General after general marched their legions on Rome, butchering each other for the empty throne. The city's infrastructure was devastated by constant siege. The once mighty capital was reduced to a smoldering ruin, where soldiers looted whatever Nero had overlooked. The empire was tearing itself apart, bleeding resources it did not possess. Yet amidst this apocalyptic violence, the daily life of the Roman economy had to grind on. If you walked through the ash-choked streets, you would inevitably be hit by a wall of stench so overpowering it would make your eyes water. This was the smell of the full-on Icas, the massive commercial laundries serving as the backbone of Roman textile manufacturing. In a world without synthetic soap, these fullers relied on one abundant, free resource to clean the grease from thousands of wool into gas. Human urine. Fleets of workers scour the city at dawn, emptying public chamber pots into massive vats. Men would then stand waist-deep in these foul, ammonia-rich pools, stomping the clothing clean for hours. It was grueling, putrid work, but highly lucrative. The tanners, too, demanded endless rivers of the stuff to soften animal hides into the tough leather needed for the armor of those very legions tearing the empire apart. Urine was not garbage. It was liquid gold flowing freely through the gutters of Rome. Out of the ashes of civil war, a hardened, pragmatic general named Vespasian finally seized absolute control. He was not a pampered aristocrat like Nero. He was a tough, no-nonsense soldier, and he inherited an empire that was an astonishing 40 billion sesterces in debt. Vespasian looked at the crumbling ruins, the empty treasury, and the desperate need for stability. He knew that to rebuild the state, he had to squeeze revenue out of every conceivable corner of Roman life. As he surveyed his ruined capital, breathing in the sharp, ammonia-scented air of the industrial districts, his gaze fell upon those highly profitable laundries. The fullers were making a fortune off a resource they gathered for absolutely nothing from the bladders of the populace. Vespasian, possessing the cold, calculating mind of a survivor, realized something revolutionary. If urine was the fuel driving a massive commercial enterprise, then the desperate state was going to take its cut. And so, wait saying, the emperor enacted the vectigal urinae, the infamous urine tax. You must understand, Vespasian did not post guards outside public latrines to charge citizens a coin to relieve themselves. That would have caused an immediate riot. Instead, he targeted the industrial supply chain. He placed a heavy levy on the commercial collection of waste from the city's vast sewers and the large public pot station at busy intersections. When merchants arrived at dawn with their terrataka amphorae to harvest the potent ammonia, imperial tax collectors were already waiting with their ledgers. Every sloshing barrel that rolled toward the massive full-on icas was now systematically taxed. The hollow state treasury slowly began to hear the clinking of gold once more. But this pragmatic solution sent shockwaves of revulsion through the Roman aristocracy. For the wealthy senatorial elite, who spent their days draped in pristine silk and debating philosophy in perfumed halls, this was an unbearable humiliation. The idea that the majestic Roman Empire was balancing its books by peddling human excrement was a catastrophic blow to their pride. The loudest voice of opposition came directly from Vespasian's own household. His eldest son and heir, Titus, was utterly appalled. Titus was a golden child, a celebrated military commander who envisioned a reign of supreme dignity. He stormed into his father's private chambers, his face flushed with aristocratic shame. He vehemently protested that this repulsive tax was dragging the sacred prestige of the imperial family through the gutters of Rome. How could the supreme leader lower himself to the status of a sewage merchant? Vespasian listened to his furious son in complete, unnerving silence. He did not yell, and he did not launch into a defense of state economics. Instead, the grizzled general performed a masterclass in psychological domination. He calmly reached into his leather pouch and pulled out a freshly minted gold orreus, a piece of extreme wealth generated directly from the proceeds of the urine. With a cold, unblinking stare, Vespasian stepped forward and deliberately thrust the gleaming metal directly beneath his son's aristocratic nose. "Does it sting?" the emperor demanded, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper that echoed off the cold marble walls. Titus, taken aback by the crude directness of the question, hesitated. He sniffed the gold coin, a piece of immaculate Roman currency bearing his father's own profile. The young prince shook his head, forced to concede the point. "No, father," he murmured. "It does not smell." Vespasian withdrew the coin, his trap perfectly sprung, and delivered 3 words that would echo through the corridors of history for 2 millennia. Tc urinae on olet. Money does not smell. It was a master stroke of ruthless pragmatism, an unapologetic declaration that the survival of the state cared nothing for the delicate sensibilities of the elite. The origin of the wealth was completely irrelevant compared to the raw, undeniable power it bought, and the power it bought was absolute salvation for the crumbling empire. The revenues from the urine poured into the imperial treasury, a literal golden stream that stabilized the economy, paid the restless legions, and dragged Rome back from the brink of total annihilation. Vespasian did not just balance the books. He amassed a fortune so vast that it allowed his dynasty to reshape the very skyline of the Eternal City. With the empire secured, the Flavian dynasty embarked on the most ambitious public works project the world had ever seen. They drained the artificial lake built by the hated Nero for his private palace, and laid the colossal foundations for a massive public amphitheater. We know it today as the Colosseum. Every time we stand in awe beneath those towering, ancient arches, marveling at the pinnacle of classical engineering, we are looking at a monument financed, in part, by the bladders of the Roman working class. In the end, this crude taxation policy teaches us a profound and enduring lesson about the nature of human civilization. The monuments of our greatest achievements are rarely built on pure ideals alone. They are constructed on the foundation of ugly, unglamorous realities, requiring a ruthless practicality that history often prefers to sanitize. The next time you marvel at the majestic remnants of an ancient empire, ask yourself what unseen, unsavory sacrifices were made to pile those beautiful